The blade for this vegetable cleaver will be forged from damascus steel of around 388 layers of 80 CRV2 and 15N20 high carbon steels. I clean and stack the metal, tack it together with a stick welder, then heat it in the forge, and when it's hot I can fuse it with the power hammer and draw it out to length. I repeat this process at least 5 times to achieve the desired number of layers. Once I've set the final weld, I clean off the edges of the billet to make sure that the welds are solid, and then I cut off the amount that I need for the knife. Now it's time to forge the blade.
So I've never forged a Chinese cleaver before, so I'm a little bit flying by the seat of my pants. But I think this preform is going to be able to make the shape that I want. So this little nub off the end is going to end up being the bolster and the tang. And this big square spot is going to be the cleaver, so it's going to kind of expand in all the directions to become the blade. Now, my one concern with this is that I might not have enough material. When I made my volume calculation, I accounted for the amount of material that I needed in the blade. What I didn't account for was the fact that I need to cut grooves across it in order to reveal the pattern that I want. And I didn't account for the extra material that I would need to remove those grooves. So I'm hoping that I added enough slop that I can just kind of stretch this blade a little bit thinner, because these blades are really thin. But it's a little bit risky because if I forge really closely and don't have as much to grind, then I can get decarburization in the blade and have other issues like that. It's also more prone to warping in the heat treat. Anyway, it'll be a trade-off. We'll see if it works. If not, I'm going to have to start all the way over from the beginning because I didn't have enough damascus to do another bigger blade. This is the only chunk that I have. Okay, so I now have the cleaver all ready for laddering. It's almost the full width that it needs to be, but it's almost half the length of what it needs to be. So it's still nice and thick. So I think that I'm gonna have enough material when we cut the grooves and then draw it all out. It should stretch out lengthwise quite a bit. but it remains to be seen. So we'll still be cutting it close, but I think I'll be able to make it work. Anyhow, I'm really pleased with how the bolster and tang came out. It's nice, clean forging. So that sets us up for success later on.
I grind grooves into both sides of this knife preform with the angle grinder. The grooves are staggered side to side, making it look kind of like a crinkled potato chip. When I flatten out that wiggly blade, the straight layers internal to the steel then assume the wiggly formation, which will be revealed as soon as the blade is finished and etched. This type of pattern is called a ladder pattern, probably because the grooves across the steel resemble the rungs on a ladder. After flattening out the wiggles in the blade and drawing the blade out to length, I finalize the shape with a little bit of careful forging.
Well, that was a fascinating object to forge. Because it was so wide, it really took a lot of different techniques to move the metal around than a standard chef knife that's maybe 2 inches wide rather than almost 4 inches wide. Anyhow, I've got the piece warming up in the forge. I've just shut off the forge after forging it, so it's heating up to maybe 1600 degrees, and then I'll let it air cool. And that'll kind of normalize it, reduce some of the tension in the steel, and if I need to make any little adjustments, I can do that cold with the hammer. And that's hopefully going to be a lot easier than trying to see where the bends are and that sort of thing when it's hot. So, Cleaver is completely heat treated, all hardened and tempered, and now it's ready for grinding. So I'm gonna take it to the grinder, clean off any of the surface scale, then we'll do a little bit of straightening, because usually things warp in the temper, and then we'll get it all ground to shape. Right, so I got this cleaver all ground. Well, maybe not all ground. We'll see. I took the cleaver, I flattened everything out, and I ground a convex edge on maybe the bottom 3/4 of an inch. So I'm leaving the edge kind of thick right now, but I really want to see how it works because I've never really used a knife like this very much. I've certainly never made one. So I brought it home. I'm gonna test it, run it through some potatoes and some onions, and see how it works, how easily it cuts, what the food release looks like. Hopefully I'll get a sense for whether I should leave the edge as is or whether I need to thin it down a little bit more, and get some feedback for how this knife is gonna perform. All right, well, I really like the cut. I mean, it's so smooth going into the potato. I think it's a little bit stickier than I would like. I mean, the fact that things stick on the side of the blade is not ideal. I'm gonna see if I can fix that a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what the best way to do that is. I may try to add a little bit of an S grind to kind of shed the food a little bit more, but in general, I'm really quite pleased with how it's working. The issue that I'm running into right now is that it's really hard to keep this thing straight. It's so freaking thin, especially in the middle of the hollow, that even during the hand sanding, it was just warping a little bit. So I was just doing a little bit of straightening. I think we're mostly there. But just kind of gently heating with the torch and just bending it. That's why I've got the glove on. So far it's working, but it's a little nerve-wracking. Okay, so I'm ready to fit the handle here. I have this beautiful piece of exhibition grade Arizona ironwood, and that's what I'm going to use for the handle. And now I'm trying to figure out exactly which portion I want to use. It looks, I think I've decided, this is a really beautiful piece here, but it's not really mirrored on the other side. I think the best, most consistent figure is going to be on this front half of the block. So I'm gonna cut off this back portion because I don't need that extra length, and then shape that into the handle.
The rear bolster of this vegetable cleaver will be mild steel, which I'll then adorn with silver and gold Koftgari. It's held in place with 3 hidden dowel pins, and supergluing the sterling silver spacer to the steel bolster allows me to precisely transfer the holes from one piece to the next. A little heat breaks the superglue loose, and then I can repeat the same process to transfer the holes for the dowel pins into the handle end. Now that all the handle pieces are fit together, it's time to bed the tang with epoxy. The process of bedding the tang involves coating the tang in wax so that the epoxy won't stick to it, and then gluing the knife together. The epoxy fills any minuscule voids between the handle and tang, allowing for a perfect fit. Once the epoxy cures, I will be able to disassemble and reassemble the knife as many times as I want, and each time the handle will go on in exactly the same place.
So now I've shaped the bolster, I've shaped the rear bolster, and now I got to shape this handle. So I traced the bolsters, both the front and rear bolsters, onto the block, and now I'm going to disassemble the whole thing and then just grind just the block on the grinder, which will make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. Here you can see that handle scraper. So I'm using this little point here, and the round sections here start to shape the flutes.
Okay, well, it's an exciting day. We're now within striking distance of the finish line. All right, so the next step is going to be to apply gold Koftgari, gold and silver Koftgari, to the rear bolster and to the front bolster. We're going to do both of those in a chrysanthemum pattern, which was the client's request. So Koftgari is this technique that I learned in India during a Fulbright grant back in 2022, and it's a technique that historically was used to embellish weaponry of all sorts. Swords, daggers, firearms, even cannons were decorated with very intricate gold and silver wirework, and that technique is called Koftgari. I learned from a couple of master Koftgari artists in India, primarily Rahul and Sandeep Singh Chauhan, who are two brothers who have learned this from their father. So it's kind of exciting to bring that aspect of tradition into my own craft. The other thing I think is cool in this way is that this particular knife ends up being an amalgam of a bunch of different traditions. So I have obviously the Chinese cleaver, vegetable cleaver type with the wide blade and the short handle and just the dimensions of it are all Chinese and as well as the way that it will be used. The chrysanthemum pattern is a traditional Chinese type of motif, but then I'm going to be layering in this Indian technique as well of the Koftgari and the embellishment, and of course it also has a whole bunch of my Western inspiration as well, with the integral bolster and the fluted handle, and just the construction techniques that are used they're all very Western. So we have these kind of three different parts of the world all represented in this one knife. I think it's going to be really cool. I'm going to start with the rear bolster because it's going to be easier. The reason it's going to be easier is that it's mild steel, so I know that it's 100% soft. It's easy to score and apply the gold. And then I'll follow by doing the front bolster, which will be a little bit more difficult because it is damascus steel, so it may be a little bit harder. I think it's going to take a little bit more muscle.
The first step in doing Koftgari is to heat the steel to a peacock blue color. The blue color allows me to see better what I'm doing as I prepare the surface for the silver and gold. Then, as the workpiece is cooling, I sharpen my knife that I'm going to use to score the surface. Once the piece is cooled, I fasten it in my vise, and then I begin the cross-hatching process. The knife scores deeply into the steel as I create a series of even scratches across the entire surface. Once I've scored the whole piece in one direction, then I do the whole piece again in an opposing direction. The intersecting scratches create a field of nearly microscopic burrs that will grab and hold the gold and silver wire as I lay it down. The process of cross-hatching is time-consuming, and I need to resharpen my knife frequently during the process. But the consistency of the cross-hatching is critical to the quality of the final product. If I miss even a little spot, the wire may not stick, or worse, it may flake off during use. Once I'm satisfied with the quality and consistency of the cross-hatching, then I heat the steel again. The blue color gives me a contrasting background on which to apply the wire, and it also burns away any oils that might prevent the wire from sticking. I often do a schematic layout for the design with a sharp scribe, but I'm careful not to scribe too deeply, otherwise I'll dull the burrs and the wire won't stick. Then it's time to apply the wire. I'm starting with the chrysanthemum blossoms in gold wire, and this wire is about 3/1000 of an inch thick, or around the diameter of a human hair. I outline each individual petal with the wire, and then fill them in with little wires laid side by side. Once the gold flowers are complete, then I switch to the leaves and stems, which I'm rendering in fine silver. I had a little trouble getting the silver and gold to stick on the sharp corners of this bolster, so I decided to try a new one with slightly more rounded corners. And I'm also changing the design a little bit this time to give it a little bit more depth. The wire's sticking beautifully on the rounded corners, so once the design is finished, then I can burnish it to lock the wire in place. A little heat from the torch helps to soften the silver and gold. Then I use an agate stone to smooth and polish both the design and the crosshatched background. After burnishing this piece, I decided I can still do better, so I'm going to start over one more time. I'm finally satisfied with this pattern, so now all I need to do is replicate it on the front bolster. Even after annealing this bolster with a torch, the high-carbon damascus is still quite a bit harder than the mild steel for the rear bolster. It means that the knife squeaks rather loudly as I crosshatch, and it also needs to be sharpened much more frequently. Despite those challenges, I still managed to get a beautiful, consistent crosshatched surface. Finally, all the Koftgari is done, and it's time to give the blade its final polish and etch.
I'm here at my etching station, which is just a little corner of the forge shop, and this is my sink. It's a 5-gallon bucket full of water. Anyway, I'm going to get this blade as clean as I possibly can. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and dip it into my etchant here. Despite what the bottle says, it's not vinegar, it's ferric chloride. I just do a quick test etch first, because if there's any little bit of oil or wax or something on the blade, I want to be able to get it off first thing before it has time to make an imprint. Looks pretty good.
I etch the knife in my ferric chloride solution for 20 to 30 minutes at a time, and then clean off the oxides with 2500 grit sandpaper. I repeat these steps until the etch is deep enough and I like the way the pattern looks. Then I neutralize the blade with baking soda, rinse it with water, rub it with alcohol, and then finally buff with sunshine cloth to get that nice shine. At this point I'm very happy with the shimmery pattern, but I still need to darken the background of the Kofgari to contrast with the silver and gold and make them stand out. Hot caustic bluing of the kind that's used on firearms is my favorite way to achieve that high contrast look. The boiling salt solution leaves a durable and attractive black oxide finish on the steel, but it doesn't affect the silver and gold in the slightest. After 20 minutes or so in the bluing solution, the steel is dark enough and I can rinse off the bluing salts and oil the blade. Because I only want the steel to be dark black behind the Koftgari, now I have to go back and re-sand the blade with 2500 grit sandpaper to re-establish that shiny and shimmery damascus finish. Then all that remains is sharpening and final assembly. here's the finished Chinese vegetable cleaver. It's simple and traditional in form, but everywhere you look there's something new and exciting to catch your eye. From that reeded desert ironwood burl to the Koftgari in silver and gold chrysanthemums that are set apart with sterling silver spacers, and then that shimmery Damascus blade. And best of all, it's razor sharp and it does its job beautifully.